Good morning, students, and welcome to today's live IELTS class. My name is Adrian, and I'm streaming to you from beautiful Victoria here on the west coast of Canada. I hope everybody has had a fantastic week and is looking forward to a great weekend, staying healthy, staying strong, staying productive. Hello, Ali. Welcome, members. This is a members chat class. Everybody is welcome to watch. In this class, we are looking at an IELTS Task 1 writing for the academic version of the IELTS exam. And we are going to write a Band 9 bar chart example. For those of you learning for the general IELTS exam, Task 1 is very different. It's a letter, it's an email that you have to write. And for that, you should check out our general IELTS YouTube channel called General English Help. This lesson is presented to you by aehelp.com for academic IELTS success. Definitely visit us there. And for general IELTS, visit us at IELTShelp.com. That's generalieltshelp.com. On both of those websites, we have loads and loads of examples and materials to help you get high band scores. We even have professional editing and proofreading services for your writing. So use those. The websites look like this. This is the general version with the green background. You can click that big red button to join our premium package. Our academic one looks like this with the blue background. Again, click that big red button. It's a one-time payment for lifetime access. And we are an official British Council IELTS test registration center and certified agents. Welcome, Abhishek. Good to see you. Hi, June. Nice to see more members joining in on this class. Okay, everyone. So if you have some questions, please send me an email to adrian@aehelp.com. Questions about our apps or our websites or IELTS, about English. We do have the listening part 3 and part 4 class coming up after this one. Continuation from yesterday's listening part 1 and 2. That will be an all chat class. Everybody will be able to join. And then we'll have a couple more classes for you tomorrow. Speaking part 2 for members, speaking part 3 for everyone. So lots more learning to be had this week. All right, everyone, let's get into our task 1 bar chart example for the day. Okay, so you get to your writing section of your IELTS exam. You finish the listening, you finish the reading. So you're 2 hours into the sit-down portion of your IELTS exam, and you're staying focused. You take a big deep breath before you start your writing section. Always start with task 1 writing. I highly recommend that because all the information for your essay is in front of you. You just have to put it together. For task 2, you actually have to plan and think about your writing. So it's good to already have a little bit of writing to warm you up from task 1 before you do that, okay? So you can start with task 2, it's allowed, but I recommend starting with task 1, okay? Task 1 is an expository essay, meaning you have to explain, expose the concept, interpret the concept of the task 1 question for the academic IELTS. General IELTS is a narrative essay or narrative writing. And the first step is just to really read the question very carefully. So in the reading section, your reading might have gotten quite quick by the end of it, especially if you're rushing to finish all of the passages in the questions. So when you get to the writing section and you're reading the question, just remember to slow down, okay? Slow down, read the question carefully, all right? Okay, so here we go. Let's look at this task one writing question. Let's read this carefully. Okay, IELTS task one writing. You should spend about 20 minutes on this task, and that's how much you should spend, 20 minutes. Okay, the following chart shows the number of units sold in a particular month for several types of stationery supplies by an office supply shop chain in the USA at 6 different locations. Report the main features and make comparisons where relevant. Write at least 150 words. Okay, so it's just some month. It's the units sold, so it's number of sales. And it's for some different kinds of stationery supplies. And it's in some sort of an office supply store chain that's in the US at different locations. Okay, sounds like a fairly complex bar graph. It could be. No worries. You stay calm and focused and go step by step. So let's take a look at the bar chart for today. Okay, nice and fancy. So here we go. The title of the chart, most common items sold by store location. Okay. And then here in the legend, we have the name of the items. Let's zoom in on that and let's see what kind of items these stationery shops are reporting their sales for. So here we go. Pedro, good luck on your IELTS exam today. I see that you're saying it's today, so good luck on that. Okay, so here are the items names. We have printer paper, we have laptops, we have pens, envelopes, binders, notepads, and backpacks. Okay, so we have 7 different items that are used by office workers and by students, I would assume, for the most part. Okay, good. So everything from printer papers to envelopes to backpacks and laptops. Okay. Now, let's take a look at the Yaxis information. So we've got our Y axis here. Let me go a little bit more over. There we go. So we've got our unit of sale from 0 to 2,200. Ooh, 2,200 units sold in a particular month. Okay. And it goes 0, 200, 400. So what do we call that when it goes 0, 200, 400, 600, 800? What's the interpretation of that? So how do we explain this when it goes 0, 200, 400, 600? It's a good piece of vocabulary to know, and I think some of our members probably know this. So how is the y-axis represented in this bar chart? Okay, bar charts, of course, have a y-axis, they have an x-axis, and they show nominal data, so name data, that's on the x-axis, and they have, yeah, that's right, Honey, very good. Honey says that is interval data. So yeah, this is interval data on the x-axis, okay? So when you're dealing with bar charts, keep in mind, this is just a note for everybody, okay? So when you're dealing with bar charts, it's important to know that you're comparing the correlation between nominal and interval data, okay? When you're writing an expository essay discussing a bar chart, you are interpreting the correlation between the interval data usually shown on the x-axis, and the nominal data shown on the y-axis. Okay, so nominal data, you can kind of think about it as name data. We don't say name, we do say nominal, but you can think about it as name data. And interval data means equal number between measures. Okay, so what I mean by that is in our example, your y-axis is your interval data. It goes from 0 to 2200 with intervals of 200. And your x-axis is your nominal data. It's your name data, okay? And in this case, we have the names of the cities with these shops, okay? So we have Austin, we have Denver, we have London, New York, San Diego, and Seattle. Okay, so those are the different cities here in the US that we're talking about. By the way, there is London in the US as well as in Canada, although of course most people are familiar with the famous capital city of London in England. You do have, and I bet you Australia might even have a place called London as well. Okay, all right, so we have a good look at our bar graph. We've read the question. What's my next step, members? So this is a little bit of a quick question here for you. So once I've read the question, I've looked at the title, the axes, the legend in the bar chart. What do I do next? What's my next step? And really, task one in the academic IELTS, to get a band 9, it's a step-by-step process. You have to know some vocabulary. You have to know how to write about line graphs, bar graphs, maps, and diagrams. And then it's just really a step-by-step recipe-like process where you have to put it all together. Pedro says you have to paraphrase. Yes, a little bit of paraphrasing for sure. Paraphrasing, and what else? So your next step here is write the overview. Okay, so step one is read the question and look at the graph carefully. Okay, step two is write the overview by paraphrasing the question. And yeah, Nick Hill says add some details. Okay, Abhishek, we're not looking at the significant feature in the graph yet. We're going to do that after in step 3. Okay, so write the overview by paraphrasing the question and adding details using the graph. Okay, all right, so we can do that now. All right, let's write the overview. Okay, so I'm going to write the paraphrase here. I see it's I'm a little bit off key here. That's okay. Just give me 1 second. Okay, there we go. Get you perfectly into the screen so that it's looking good. Yeah, the overview is the introduction, June. That's right. IELTS has a kind of a strange description of what the introduction actually is. June, in university, they will just call the introduction both the overview as the paraphrasing in this case and the main feature together. But IELTS likes to kind of see this separately. So the overview, you can think about it this way, is made up of the introduction plus the main feature. Now, that's really the overview. IELTS likes to see this in 2 paragraphs. University professors like to see this in 1 paragraph because it makes sense to have it in 1 paragraph. But whatever, let's stick with what IELTS likes to do because we're doing the IELTS exam. So let's look at this part here and then paraphrase it. So add some details, like instead of saying the following chart, you should write this bar chart. Instead of saying shows, you could write depicts or illustrates. Okay, so using your own words. All right. I'll do a little bit of this, you do a bit of this, and then we'll compare. Okay, so we've got how many stationery? We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different stationery items, okay, ranging from printer paper to laptops to binders and backpacks. I don't know if I would list all 7 here. Okay. You can use the word ranging in this case. All right. So there is my paraphrase introduction using the question, using the graph to give a bit more details for this bar chart. Okay. So Ali says these bars depict the number of sales for 7 distinct stationary items in a given month from 0 to 2,200 units with intervals of 200 by the office supply stores in 6 different cities within the USA. Ali, that is some beautiful paraphrasing with nice detail, okay? That's exactly what the IELTS examiners want to see. Make sure your comma does not have a space before it, okay? So your comma should be right after 200 there. So you have a fairly clean introduction there, Ali. That would be categorized as a band 8, okay? A band 8 to band 9. Just careful with that comma, okay? Nick Hill says, the bar graph illustrates the information about the quantity of sales from 0 to 2,200 with the interval of 200. Simpler, Nick Hill, with intervals or with an interval of 200 in a specific month for 7 different stationary items by an office supply chain in 6 major cities within the USA. Very nice, Nick Hill. That's some nice writing as well. Okay. This is my paraphrase here. This bar chart depicts the number of units sold from 0 to 2,200 in a given month for 7 different stationary supplies, ranging from backpacks to printer paper and laptops, by an office supply store chain in 6 different major cities across America, okay? Because they are major cities, okay? Yeah, Ali, absolutely. Both you and Nick Hill have at least a band 8 level introduction so far. So that's very, very good, okay? And then after that comes the main feature. So again, in the IELTS, they like to see these two paragraphs separately. In university college, you'll find the professors prefer to see these together. It makes sense. The whole thing is kind of the overview, introduction all in one. And then you want to write the main feature. Okay, all right. And I see that we have Akshay as well writing the introduction, which is good. So Akshay, June, if you have something similar to what you just saw, then you're on the right track. Okay, so now we want to write the main feature. What should you do when you're thinking about the main feature? What should you be thinking about? What should you be looking at, members? Okay, I'm putting this question out there for you today. Okay, you should know this from previous classes if you've taken some Task 1 classes with me before. So when you think about main feature, what's your first kind of approach, or what's your first step? Okay, Ali says not highest and lowest. Akshay says highest and lowest. Yeah, Ali, not highest and lowest. Nick Hill, not necessarily major and minor sales. Okay? That's not necessarily true. Okay? So thinking about highest, lowest, it's okay. It's not the end of the world, but that shouldn't always be your go-to. Okay? In the IELTS, both in the speaking and in the writing, highest band scores are awarded to students who have original content. Okay? Okay, so June says, look at the main patterns and the trends. And in order to do that, what should you do? What should you do in order to do that? Okay, this is again a very important strategy. So let me give you a little bit of info on this. Okay, so step 3, write the main feature. In order to do this, look at the graphs visually. Okay? What are the most observable visual patterns and trends? Okay? So this is not necessarily lowest and highest. Okay. If you do lowest and highest, you can get a band 6, maybe a band 6.5 if you have some really good writing. Perhaps a band 7 if we're really stretching it. But in order to get into those higher band scores, because again, remember, academic is also testing your thinking. It's not just testing your English. You have to go above and beyond just simply looking for highest and lowest. So what do we notice when we visually look at these bars? What are kind of the main visual patterns that we can recognize right away? Okay, so visually, okay, don't just think highest and lowest, but visually think about what you notice that's obvious, okay, that kind of jumps out at you. It's like, whoa, look at that. Okay, so yeah, we see highest and lowest, but we also see some other interesting points here as well. Okay, very good. So Akshay says that all of the cities seem to have a similar pattern. So all of these cities have these long green bars. They tend to have similar kind of sales here for these 3 colors. And then again, somewhat similar sales for these 3 colors. And All three of the cities tend to have that same pattern, right? Very good, Akshay. So all of the cities seem to have the same pattern, but, okay, but what? Okay. Yeah, Devansh says, but just varying in the amount. So we can see that Denver has the greatest total sales, and San Diego seems to have the lowest total sales, but the pattern, meaning the amount for each item, seems to be quite similar relative for each city. Okay, so that's the really interesting overview or main feature in this case. Okay, so write that, use your words and express that as clearly as possible. Okay, I'm going to do the same. So let's do this. Okay, the main feature. All right. So there is what I have. Let's see what you come up with. Okay. So what I have is at first observation, that's a leading expression. So let's put a comma after that. It seems that the relative number of sales, this is a nice word to remember here for describing graphs. Okay, it can be used for pie charts as well. So relative number of sales for each type of stationery item shows a similar pattern for all 6 cities, but the total number of sales are significantly different. Denver having the most sales overall and San Diego having the least. Okay, let's see what you've come up with. So Ali says, at first glance, it is apparent that all of these 6 cities have similar patterns in the number of stationery units sold for each item, but the total number of sales is quite different. Okay, Ali, very close. There's a couple of just small pieces missing there that I would put in to make it even more accurate. Okay, so in number of stationery units sold for each item. Okay, because the items are different, but for each of them, they're similar among these 6 cities. Okay, but the total number of sales differ significantly or quite a bit. Okay, all right. So emphasize that big difference. Okay. Nick Hill says, overall, it is evident that the number of sales for each common item shows a similar pattern among the cities. However, Denver has the most overall sales and San Diego has the lowest. Very good, Nick Hill. Okay, that's a good job there. All right. June says, immediately, it is noticeable that each cities follow a similar pattern in terms of stationery items sold, though there are significant differences with total numbers sold to customers. Okay, that works, June. Careful with your word repetition, like sold, sold. Try to avoid that, okay, if you have to rephrase. but it's good. June, that would be a solid 7 to 8 as well. Okay, very nice. All right. So I have my main feature along with my introduction. Now I'm ready for my analyses. And when I'm thinking about my analyses, as long as I've done a good job with my introduction and my main feature, my analyses shouldn't be too bad here, okay? Because my main feature is also kind of like my thesis, okay? So this is equatable to your thesis statement, okay? So what that means is that if I've done a good job with my overview, I'm really now, when I go into my analyses, I'm going to go into more detail with each of my points. So at first observation, it seems that the relative number of sales for each type of stationery items shows a similar pattern for all 6 cities. So that means that my first part of my analyses will be discussing this similar pattern for all 6 cities, okay? And then here I write, but the total number of sales are significantly different, Denver having the most sales overall and San Diego having the least. Okay, so there will be the second part of my analyses going into more detail. Is that clear? Okay, so Akshay, Devansh, Hans, is that clear what I'm saying there about the analyses? While you think about that, let me just read some more of those overviews. So Devansh says, at first glance, it is observable that all stationery materials sold follow similar patterns in the 6 different cities, comma, but variations in the number, in the total numbers are different. Okay, Devansh, don't start a sentence with but. You should be joining that sentence with but. Hans says, in general, it can be seen that each city has similar patterns for each items sold. Passive voice. However, the total number of sales are significantly different. Good, Hans. Just remember your passive voice. Okay, and I see those affirmations, the yes and yes, sirs. That's good. All right, so now we want to go into these details. Okay. All right. So we're saying that the pattern is the same. So now we want to talk about the pattern a little bit more. Okay. So the pattern here we can talk about. First of all, is the notepad. So this is representing notepad. Okay. And notepads had the highest sales for every single store, okay, proportionally, all right? So that's the pattern. That's the description of the pattern. So notepads is number 1, okay? And then the orange here is pens. The red is envelopes. Okay, so pens, envelopes, and this light blue one here is the binder. All right. Okay, so when you have a bar chart like this, there is no way that you have enough time in your IELTS exam to specifically write about each store having each of these sales. So you have to group your ideas together, okay? You have to create clear ideas, but you have to group them together, okay? So here we want to write about notepad first. We want to write about envelopes, pens, and binders second. And then clearly we're going to write about the printer paper, the laptops, and the backpacks. Third. Okay. All right. So we're roughly looking at proportions here. So what can we say if we look at these proportions here? Let's look at this first one. What can we say about the proportion of sales for each of these items? So if we compare printer paper, laptops, and backpacks to pens, envelopes, and binders, what can we say? Roughly, how many more pens, envelopes, and binders were sold compared to paper, laptop, and backpacks? Okay, KenFam, no worries. This lesson will be available to you on the channel, so you can check it out later. Okay. All right. So what can we say about the comparison of sales of printer, paper, laptops, backpack compared to pens, envelopes, and binders? Yeah. So Ali says about twice as many. So about twice as many pens, envelopes, and binders were sold in each city as printer, paper, laptops, backpacks, roughly speaking. Yeah, that's accurate. And how many notepads were sold? Okay. Yeah, and Devon says about 3 times as many units of notepads as all of these. Okay, good. So we can go about this in a few different ways. I would definitely discuss notepads first. It's the most significant. It had the highest sales. So we can start from there, okay? So let's start with number 1. Let's start with notepads. Now, some of you might say, hey, I want to combine this with the cities, so actually giving some numbers here. So close to 2,200 units in Denver and about so-and-so for San Diego, okay? I'm going to leave that for a little bit later. So I'm just going to talk about the proportions, okay, first, all right? Okay, so everybody's got the right idea. All right, let's do this. So let's write a little bit and make these comparisons, okay? Okay, I'm going to write, you write, and then we'll compare. I got to get moving here so that we can develop this essay. So I'm going to start writing these first 3 points, and then we'll talk about the other points of comparing the cities here afterwards, okay? All right, remember, I have to fit my introduction, my main feature, and the next part, which is the analyses, into of about 200 to 220 words. 150 words is the absolute minimum. For Band 8, Band 9 essays, and I've talked to a lot of examiners over the years, they always say, yeah, it's very difficult to get a Band 9, if not impossible, with just 150 words. Band 8, Band 9 essays are usually more like 200, 220 words, especially for a bar graph like this. I just don't think that you can actually include all of the relevant and important information in just 150 words. Okay, Ali, don't panic, all right? So now comes the analyses. Okay. Again, those were pens, envelopes, and binders. And the last three were laptops, printer paper, and backpacks. Okay, now I'm going to just read over that, make sure it makes sense, and I haven't made any big mistakes. Now, this is quite concise, and that's always your goal, but if it takes you one or two extra sentences to express these ideas clearly, that is absolutely okay. So at deeper inspection, notepads were the most sold item at each location, with numbers at roughly 50% more than the second most popular supplies, which were pens, envelopes, and binders. These latter three items means that I'm referring to these three items. So these latter three items had about twice the number of sales as the remaining three kinds of merchandise. Don't forget words like merchandise and goods, okay? Laptop, printer paper, and backpack, okay? Now I can get to the specifics here by looking at the stores, okay? So keep writing here, members, and I'm going to look up at the chat and give you some feedback intermittently, okay? Like Hans says, in detail, Notepad is the most sold item in all these 7 cities, with almost twice more than the second most populars, which were pens, envelopes, and binders. Yeah, I think it's about 50% more than those. Okay, so careful with your accuracy of the information. So it's roughly 50% for each of those if you look carefully. Okay. All right. So now I'm going to go city by city. So I'm going to start with Denver. I mentioned that in my overview. So, okay, so Denver sold about 2,200, 1,400 units of envelopes, pens, and binders. And so this is where I get into specifics, okay? And about 700 units of backpacks, laptops, and printer paper. Okay. All right. So that's the most. Now, when I describe the other cities, okay, so the next city here is Seattle. So Seattle had the second most sales. Now, I'm not going to write about the sales for each one. Instead of doing that, what would be a smart way to quickly describe that Seattle was second and then the number of sales without talking about each sale specifically? What would be a good idea to do there? Okay, so tell me that, and I'm going to read a couple more of what students have written there. Okay, so June writes, looking at the data in detail, notepads were the most sold in all the 6 cities, with numbers almost 50% more than those of pens, envelopes, and binders, which came as the second most popular item. Good, June. And then the third kind of grouping would be next, right? So Ali says gross total. Yeah. So thinking about the total for sure, Ali, it's definitely what we want to do when we're comparing Seattle and Denver. We already know that the pattern is the same because we've discussed that. So we don't have to talk about each specific number like 1,600, right? Okay. So gross total, or we could calculate something here as well. We could calculate roughly a percent difference or a fractional difference between these numbers, okay? So let's say that we have about 2150 here, right? And for Seattle, we have about, it's about 1,600 here, roughly, let's say. So what is the percent difference here between the total number of sales? Okay, roughly. Again, you don't have to have exact figures here. We're not holding a conference for this supply store chain, but roughly. Okay, what is it? Yeah, so it's roughly 2/3, Ali. I agree with you. Okay. 14% I don't think is accurate, Pedro. So the difference between these two, I think it's more than 14%. Okay. Abhishek says it's roughly about 25%. Yeah, I would say 25% is closer. Okay. So 25% difference in the total number of sales. Okay, roughly. It doesn't have to be exact. Okay, so I can continue with that. Okay, and then I can keep going that way. All right. So Seattle had the second most sales with about 25% less total than Denver. And then that was followed by London, Austin, New York, and finally San Diego, which was less than a quarter sales of Denver. And I'm done. Okay, so that's all I'm going to do. I have to make sure I have 40 minutes left to do task 2. I don't need to write about each of these cities in great detail. Okay, what's most important is that I get the key pieces of information, like the most observable features and comparisons. Okay, that's why task 1 questions always say, discuss the main features and make comparisons where relevant. It doesn't make sense to compare San Diego to New York. It's not relevant overall. Okay, so as an example here, I would then write okay. Now, you can write roughly, or you can also use the word approximately. So Seattle had the second highest sales total, which were approximately 25% less than that of Denver. Okay. All right, let's take a look at the other cities. So this was followed by London, then Austin, then New York, and finally San Diego. Austin, Texas, of course, I'm guessing. So London, Austin, New York, and finally San Diego. Okay. And San Diego. And San Diego compared to Denver had only about, well, we can take a look here and make a quick calculation if I've got a bit of time. So again, for Denver, we can just look at this green bar. That'll give us a good idea. For notepads, it was 2150, and for San Diego, it was about 400, so 20%. Okay, so it was just 20% of the sales of Denver. All right. So now I'm definitely getting into that 200, 220 word count for this bar graph. All right, members, do you see how I kind of logically went through step by step for what is most important and what is least important? And especially looking at patterns rather than looking at just most and least. Does that make sense? So do you see how that worked? June, you write 5 times. So 5 times fewer sales you could write as well for San Diego compared to Denver. Absolutely. So there are different ways to express these ideas. Okay, what I wrote here in this essay is the structure is important. It's not the exact words that I'm using. You could write the same essay using very different words, okay? All right, Nick Hill says, yes, I got it, which is good. Okay, all right, so I'm going to read this essay now. I might include a summary if I'm really pushing for that band 9. I'm going to read this from the top, make sure it makes sense. So this bar chart depicts the number of units sold from 0 to 2,200 in a given month for 7 different stationery supplies ranging from backpacks to printer paper and laptops by an office supply store chain in 6 different major cities across America. At first observation, it seems that the relative number of sales for each type of stationery item shows a similar pattern for all 6 cities, but the total number of sales are significantly different, Denver having the most sales overall and San Diego having the least. At deeper inspection, notepads were the most sold item at each location, with numbers at roughly 50% more than the second most popular supplies, which were pens, envelopes, and binders. These latter 3 items had about twice the number of sales as the remaining 3 kinds of merchandise: laptop, printer paper, and backpack. As a specific explanation for this, Denver, which had the most sales, sold almost 2,200 units of notepads, 1,400 units of envelopes, pens, and binders, and about 700 units of backpacks, laptops, and printer paper. Seattle had the second highest sale total, which were approximately 25% less Now here, just a quick plural because it's sales total. Oh, sales total. Sorry, it's correct. So sales total, which were approximately 25% less than that of Denver. The rank order of cities in total number of sales followed as London, Austin, New York, and San Diego. San Diego, compared to Denver, had only about 20% total sales. Okay. In summary, the popularity of each type of goods sold at these stores are relatively comparable, while the popularity of a specific store in a given city is significantly different from the others. Okay? So that's what we can summarize by this, right? That the items themselves have relatively the same kind of popularity. This office supply store chain must have some really great notepads because they're really popular, regardless of where the store is. But the store's popularity itself is different given the different locations. Okay, so that's the summary here, right? In summary, the popularity of each type of goods sold at these stores are relatively comparable, while the popularity of a specific store in a given location or city is significantly different from the others. This is what you need to write. And Hans Andrianta says, okay, I got it. All right, so that's what you want to practice. Okay, use your logic. That's all the time I have for this Band 9 bar graph example. I am very pleased, members, with the sentences that you're coming up with. That's fantastic. June writes, to sum up, notepads were the most popular stationaries in all 6 American cities, while printer paper, laptops, backpacks are of least popularity. That's a good summary as well, June. Okay. Yeah, Hans, if you have time, if you have a minute and you can come up with a sensible summary, it's not your own opinion, okay, it's something that you can see clearly in the graph, then yes, because a Band 9 caliber expository essay will always include some form of summary, okay? All right. Okay, students, wonderful job. Akshay, you're making me blush here at the end of the class. I'm going to be back in about 30 minutes with listening part 3 and 4 practice for a Band 9. That's a continuation from yesterday's class, and everybody will be able to join up. So please hang around. I'm Adrian. I'm signing out for now, but I will be back in half an hour. Great work, members. See you soon. Bye.